Hello, welcome again to another episode of Therapy, etc. I'm really excited that you are here either watching or listening, and I have a really special guest today. I will have her introduce herself, and let's just get the conversation going. Miss Jenny.ton.
Hello, hello. Happy Alvarado.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Even better now that I get to see you finally. Doing those
I
things.
know.
I always like,
Yes.
you're my girl.
Thank you, babe. So I only just said like that we have a guest coming in. So introduce yourself, Jenny, just so that people can know that are listening or watching will know who you are and what you're about.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's such a honor to be a part of Patty Alvarado's podcast. She's one of my personal heroes. So I'm just grateful to be here. To meet you virtually. My name is Jenny.ton. I am a creative, a do-gooder, an entrepreneur, founder of Jenny.ton.consulting. Yeah, and a little bit about me. I'm a proud daughter of immigrant parents who migrated from Vietnam because of the Vietnam War, or if you're in Vietnam, they call it the American War, something to really think about. And was raised in Baldwin Park, California, BP Pride in Southern California, where Patty has been one of my really good friends since childhood. I'm located in San Francisco now, and really grateful to feel like I have homes in Southern California and Northern California. So it's like the best of both worlds of living here in the beautiful state of California.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that you said Baldwin Park because I feel like for people that don't know where that is, it's the home of the first In-N-Out.
Right.
I used to work there.
Yes, you did. Oh my God, and In-N-Out hats. Oh, you look so cute in them.
I know. So if anybody needs a reference, look up the first In-N-Out. That is where we are from. That is where I worked. So yeah, that was
very
yeah. So I've known you, Jenny, since we were like did we meet in like 8th grade? No, was it in high school or 8th grade?
I feel like it was middle school.
Middle school. It feels like a little blurry, but
right.
many years. We know a lot about each other, and you're definitely who I go see when I go to San Francisco. So it's so nice to see you because the last time I saw you in person was when was that? Like last maybe early March, right before the shutdown.
That's right. I was in LA for training, and San Francisco, as you all probably recall, was the first city in the US to officially call a city lockdown because of COVID. And I remember thinking, oh my God, am I going to be stuck here in LA? Which, is okay. I actually don't mind because I have you, I have my family. Yeah. But I was able to make it back into the city. But it was March 16th. I remember that very day when San Francisco officially shut down.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you wondering if you're going to be able to go back, and I'm like over here, like, yeah, just stay with me.
Right. Oh, I was like, I'm happy to stay down here.
So, Jenny, now, like, I know that you've been through like so many different phases, so many different kind of all the same kind of like career themes, I guess you can say, but in different spaces. I know like before you had your own company, you wanted to do a few other things in education, but now you're doing something all for yourself, by yourself.
Yes.
So tell me, like, what is Jenny.ton Consulting?
Right. Yeah. So for me, I've been fortunate to have been able to navigate various spaces, from nonprofits, which was like my first job out of college, and I still am a part of nonprofits as a board member now, and I volunteer for several organizations that I truly believe in, to being my own business owner, which you remember, to being in education, and education has always been where my heart has been since I was young. And my youth work started as young as back in Baldwin Park, carried on to college, and has continued since then. So it was nice to go back into education for some time. And then after that, realizing I've been fortunate to have a multifaceted career, and been able to navigate these amazing spaces. And I thought, it's time again. It's time for me to start my own business again, be my own boss, create change on my terms, the way how I envision it and have always envisioned it. And so I really missed that aspect of being a full autonomy and being able to have full creative license. And so I had been thinking about that more and more. But honestly, for some period of time, I tried not to think about that. As you know, it was a painful experience from the first business. And so I pretty much put that in the back burner of my mind, but it always would come back. It would always pop up. And, you know, my partner, you know, Johnny has always been a number one advocate and would always remind me and tell me, you know, you should be your own boss again. You should run your own business.
You know how to do it, Jenny.
And he always reminded me of that. And I would always ignore him. I wouldn't listen to him because there was so much pain and trauma from that first experience that I was like, okay, well, I appreciate, thank you, but I don't want to talk about it, right? And then with COVID, I think it was a time for so many of us, including myself, where I had to pause. I had to take a forced pause in my life to really rethink, reassess, reevaluate. And every single time that I had those moments of deep internal reflection and thinking, whether I was meditating, I always went back, what brought me joy? What made me really happy? When was the last time I felt that flow in life where everything lined up and I felt like I was doing exactly what I was meant to do? And it always went back to when I had my first business. And so I started to really listen to my heart again, really listen to my spirit. You know, it's like your body, there's signs around you constantly. It's always constantly telling you that there's so much noise in our lives. And for me, I always had so much noise in my life. I was always doing so many things at one time. It was very easy for me to not listen, really, really hear my inner voice, listen to my body, listen to the spirits, listen to the higher power. And so I finally did. And at the time, I really didn't know what I was going to do next. Consulting was something I did on the side for many years. Never thought I would do it full time. And after lots of prayer and a lot of meditation, 3 different individuals reached out to me around the same time. It's like, I would love to hire you. And that was it. That was so clear to me that, you know, the God or higher power was speaking to me, was like, this is what you need to do now. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, it's time for me to do it. Let's do it. And so Jenny.ton Consulting, you know, is pretty much a wonderful amalgamation of all that I'm passionate about, all that I'm really good at. And so I've always felt, in order for me to create and carve that life that I want for myself, I can't expect anyone to do that, I need to do it for myself. So with Jenny.ton Consulting, I specialize in diversity, equity, inclusion, nonprofit and business strategy, marketing, communications, you know, personal styling, and other
You do
things.
It all.
Right. So it's like a lot of the aspects that I enjoy doing and that I'm good at, now I can do it all at once. And it's been really incredible since then.
Wow. So you've mentioned, and you know, as much as comfortable as you want to share, but you mentioned that your first experience was so traumatic. So can you share a little bit about what made it so traumatic and what's different now?
Thank goodness I have a therapist that I'm able to process through.
There you go. There you go.
I got my Patty Alvarado as well. Actually, I've been processing this a lot with my therapist. Recently, I just more recently found an incredible therapist, and that's one of the aspects of having a therapist, was to really face that trauma and that experience that for me was really locked. And I tried to lock it and put it away for as long as I could. But as you know, as a therapist, when you have trauma and pain, it always resurfaces. It always comes back and manifests in your life, whether you know it or not. And I started realizing and making those connections. And so I would say the biggest thing that really comes to mind is the sense of loss in multiple facets in various ways, such as, you know, one, you knew how much I loved that business. It was my baby, right? It was like my pride and joy. I put everything into that. And so the idea of losing something that you believe in and you've put so much of yourself into, to lose that is hard, right? So when it was no longer around, I felt like I lost a sense of my identity, because so much of what I was doing at the time was so rooted in that business. Our identities, my business partner and our identities were really rooted in it. We were able to really create a business that really showcase who we were. You know, we cared about community, cared about social justice, our activist work. Like, we were able to really fuse all our passions, creativity and fashion, all of that into this beautiful space. Another loss was, you know, the business partner at the time was also a best friend. We were roommates, so she was like sister. So that loss of that as someone who was that close to me was really painful. And then the loss of a sense of community and friends that you thought were true individuals that would be in your life for a long time. You realize, okay, it's very clear that they won't be. So just a lot of
things happening. Yeah.
Right. All at the same time.
Right.
I was like, loss culminated on top of more loss, culminated on top of more loss. So yeah, it was a lot for sure.
So now in the new business, how do you hope to like protect, you know, the spirit of it, and because it's, you know, we never know what's going to happen, and the hope is that it will continue to grow and flourish. But
totally,
I can see how it can be hard to want to even step into this space again. And I love that you said that you have a therapist, so like I'm already like 2 thumbs up on that, right? But what do you hope will be different this time?
There's definitely a lot of lessons learned for sure, from when you've gone through it, where everything is solely dependent on yourself. There's a lot of lessons learned, and that's been a lot of the processing over the years, are the lessons learned from that experience. And so through those lessons learned, I won't repeat those same mistakes, such as for folks out there who want to go into partnerships. I absolutely recommend you definitely need to have an operating agreement that really clearly delineates the ownership of the company, who owns how much of the company. Make sure that's clearly in the agreement or the contract that you have. We didn't have that, which made the separation of the business and, you know, what we once had really even more difficult, because we never had that in writing. And so that will never repeat again.
You know, and let me just say that, like, being a business owner, it's hard. Like, just what you just said, like an operating agreement, like, even if I was going into a partnership, I mean, I'm assuming that I'll probably do some research if I were to ever do that, but I don't even know that exists, you know, until you just say this now. There's like so many things that I feel like we're constantly learning, things that, you know, I never knew about. Sounds like, you know, we're all just kind of learning it as we go.
Absolutely. And that's life, right? We're flying the plane, you know, as we're building it, right? So that's what it feels like when you run a business. Now that I've flown the plane, there are things that I absolutely know in terms of building it that I need to do. That's a non-negotiable, and that's one I would recommend. You know, and when we started it, we were 25. We were in our mid-20s. We were so young, very naive, thinking, oh, it would never happen to us. Like, you know, we're so solid, we're tight, like we won't be part of the 98% of partnerships that dissolve. And so, and I knew all that. I knew all the data, I knew all the statistics, you know, took some business courses, all of that. So I knew the high probability of partnerships not lasting. And so I think, you know, that idealistic view, you know, led to us not feeling like we needed to have operating agreement. And then at the end of the day, once you go through such a business breakup, you realize, wow, that could have prevented a lot of pain and heartache and time and money and attorneys, you know, all of that. Yeah.
Wow. So now it's on your terms.
Right.
So how long has it, because I just kind of saw you posting all of these amazing things, by the way, like throughout the week, that I'm just like, wow, there's so much information. What's like kind of like your inspiration as you're going through, each week? How do you even create this creative content that you're putting up?
Right. So when I was starting off really thinking about social media again and going back into that world, which, as you know, present day is absolutely instrumental to having a business, is that visibility, it's the brandings, the credibility. And so when I thought about, okay, what would be my social media strategy, I approached it in terms of what I'm specializing in terms of what are my consulting services? What are people coming to me for? And again, as I was saying earlier, that, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of experience in various creative areas of running a business, from marketing, right, to diversity, equity, inclusion, to, again, like the fashion styling. And then in addition to that, a lot of areas of growth that I've developed over the years that I found was so valuable for me as a person to grow. And then to also, as an educator, I learned a lot in terms of how to then pass it on to others, right? And then on top of that, the culmination of all of the racial, political, socioeconomic strife that was happening at the same time, that was constantly on my mind. And I kept thinking, what is the common denominator that I'm seeing with the continual historical issues around race, right? It's like, it feels like a perpetual cycle, like here we are again. And so I just kept thinking about it, and I realized one area that if we all had the skills and really practice, and it's not something we were taught, it's not taught in primary, in middle school and high school, or even in college, is active listening, right? Compassionate listening. And I really learned that, especially in education. And I realized if everyone who sat on different sides of the table who don't agree, those who don't look like us, those we may fear because they don't look like us, or we've never really developed true relationships with those people who don't look like us, right? And so I thought if we can all really understand what active listening really means and really practice that with that person we may fear or not know a lot about, that it could be a breakthrough, that we would really, really learn about one another if we truly practice active listening. And that is also
absolutely.
And that's also the gateway to vulnerability, right? And to a sense of understanding is also so healing. Active listening is very, very healing. Just the act of being able to speak and feel like someone is genuinely listening to you is healing in and of itself. And I feel like so many of the disagreements, the contentions, the conversations, even the conversations I've had with people that I don't agree with, are so hard and so difficult is because we're both not practicing active listening. All we're thinking about are rebuttals, what we're going to say next, what will be my reply to what you just said. And so I realized, wow, if you really truly can practice and mirror it and demonstrate it to someone else, imagine the epiphany or the aha moment that that person may have about what they might have thought about me. Or maybe there could have been a lesson learned from the conversation together that they can carry on with them to the next person they speak to that may not agree with them or have the same views as them. And so,
absolutely.
Through active listening, that really helped me to develop part of my social media strategy. So there's a theme for every single day of the week. So I was thinking, okay, we need to have consistent postings, and also for me to be able to be strategic in what I'm posting. I decided let's have a theme for every day that I'm posting. So Monday is marketing communications, or marketing communications Monday. Tuesday is trust in yourself and your journey. And Wednesday is work smarter, not harder.
I like that. I'm all about that.
Thursday is talk less, listen more. And that really
Mhm.
was really inspired around active listening or compassionate or empathetic listening. And then Friday
Mhm.
is diversity, equity, inclusion. So that one is for your best DEI life. And then Saturday is Style Saturdays. And then
Uh-huh.
Sunday is Serve Positivity Sunday. So all those themes are really who I am, is what I really believe in, is what I try to really practice, what I really try to
Mhm.
mirror, where the areas I'm constantly developing and growing. And so that's how I came up with my content, and it gave me very clear direction every single day what to focus on. So I thought that was really
Yeah,
helpful for me personally.
that is beautiful. I love it. I think that is so cool. And I need to pay a little bit more attention to the different days, because I'm like thinking I'm sure I can use some of these skills and tools that you share. It's we're always a constant work in progress. And so learning from other professionals, especially those that are your dear friends, I think is like an added bonus, you know?
Yeah, and I love learning too. And the content that I appreciate is always teaching me something new or showing me something new. So I'm like
Hmm.
trying to mirror that too. It's like, okay, well, I don't just want to post for the sake of posting. I do want it to be very intentional.
Yep.
Um, the goal is always to inform something new to whoever is coming upon it, or my
Hmm.
followers. And so I do really hope there is some takeaway from what I'm putting out there.
Hmm. So I know that you were posting a lot about like the model Asian minority. At least I know that that's something that I've heard many times. And then that paired with the violence against the Asian community that's been happening more recently. What are your feelings on that? How are you feeling about that?
Um, it's a lot. I appreciate that you're asking. How are you feeling about that? I feel like that's one easy tool that anyone has in their toolbox that you can use
Hmm.
to reach out to your friend who is AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander. So something as simple as, let me text so and so and just ask, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Especially during this time where there's so much violence that we're now finally seeing happening towards the AAPI community. So yeah, so thank you for asking even those simple words like, how are you doing? Um, it's been a lot, definitely. I think for me personally, it's not a surprise. I think for a lot of folks of color, when it comes to the feeling of being ostracized, being the scapegoat, being the
Hmm.
target of hate, the target of violence or racism, I think a lot of us, understandably, are in agreement that it's not anything new that we've experienced in our communities, especially in the United States. The country was founded on racialized, very racist, very strategic strategies and ideologies. And
Hmm.
so, as someone who loves history, and I appreciate, all the history classes that I've taken, all the Asian American Studies courses that I've taken, all the incredible books that I still read. For me, it was like, okay, we've been here before, so it's not a surprise. Even though it's not a surprise, at the end of the day, it's still frustrating. It's
Yeah.
still painful. It's still disheartening
Hmm.
because you hope by this time we wouldn't have these recurring conversations. Of course, that's the unfortunate part is these are recurring conversations, especially amongst AAPIers or even BIPOC folks, right? Black, Indigenous people of color. This
Hmm.
is something I feel like I've been constantly talking about my entire life and fighting for, trying to raise voice and visibility around it, but oftentimes feeling like it's going on deaf ears, being unheard. Um, so the positive, the opposite is that even with Black Lives Matter movements that's been happening over several years, um, I think for me personally as a BIPOC, person of color, that I'm starting to feel heard for the first time because
Yeah.
of their visibility that we're starting to finally see. And unfortunately, it took a lot of folks in the AAPI community to bring visibility to it, right? I think in the AIP community, we always feel invisible. Again, because we're considered the model minority, what do we have to worry about as a group? What type of hatred, violence, racism do Asian Americans face? Like, I've gotten that question before. Like, I don't understand how are Asian Americans ever, how do they ever, face racism, right? So I've gotten those questions.
How frustrating, just hearing
right?
you say that, it makes me frustrated. And then also just, I feel like my little heart is like feeling all kinds of feelings, because I'm just like, oh, I just want to reach and hug, and hug you. And it's just, it makes me sad to know that this has been happening within our community, people of color. And I just wish it wasn't, like,
Right.
it's an unfortunate, it's not even the word I would want to use, but it's just, I wish things were different. I wish as a community, as a nation, as a country, we were different.
Right.
And, it's 2021 and it feels like, have we made progress? And I'm, like you said, I'm glad that, like, on the positive, voices are now being heard. We're being heard and seen in a different way, but how many lives and how many things have had to happen to get to that point?
Exactly. Right. It unfortunately, it's, in order to have a breakthrough, there's a breakdown, right? Like, you look at George Floyd, it's like, how many Black bodies, folks, have already been murdered and died and lynched, right, for centuries.
Yeah.
For finally a collective movement, the longest collective movement of protests in US history, to happen. And when you look at those protests, you see such diversity of people together, and that is really reassuring. And the positive that I see is like, okay, the allies are actually finally coming out and are really doing something about it, right? And so the allyship was really powerful to see. And I do feel like we have allyship in the AA community with folks of other ethnicities and races too. And that gives me hope. And that's a positive that I've been seeing during this difficult time, despite the rise of violence.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't take for us to be screaming and constantly like posting about it for mainstream media and folks to finally pick it
Pay
up.
attention. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, unfortunately, we've had to do that. But I do feel with the collective voices and people outside of the AAPI community posting and talking about it, that is really, really hopeful. And it is a great mirror and example of solidarity and how to be an anti-racist too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jenny, any final words before we wrap up for today? I've so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for, sharing all of these things and what you're doing in the world. Like you said, you're a do-gooder, and I love that.
Thanks.
So, any final thoughts, gems you want to leave us with?
I mean, because of the topic that we were just discussing, I do encourage folks to, you could go to my website, jennyton.com/journal, go to that specific page, is my journal, aka blog. But I have postings specifically on what you can do to really be an ally and to be an anti-racist. So there's very specific things on there that you can do. I've gotten that a lot lately, like, what can I do? How can I help? And so that was really a catalyst for me to like post, okay, these are the specific things that all of us can do collectively. And I've taken that from incredible other AAPI social justice organizations. They really created an incredible toolkit of what we can all do. And I essentially took it from there and added that to my website. And there's some really important videos that I think will be helpful in terms of learning more about the history of violence, racism, discrimination, bias in the AAPI community. Again, it's a very long history a lot of people are not aware of. It's not a fault of anyone's, unfortunately. in the United States, our history is very Eurocentric, very white-centered. So a lot
Mhm.
of this, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's new information, and that's okay. But as individuals, we can always make that effort to
Yeah.
learn, investigate, to be critical, and to ask
To
those
ask,
questions.
I was about to
Yeah,
say that. Ask the questions.
ask the questions. Yeah,
Yep.
ask those questions of folks who don't look like you. And so I encourage folks, you know, to do that, and to practice being anti-racist, which is really about taking action, and not being complicit.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if someone says something that's racially insensitive, even if it's not about you or the group you identify with, please have the courage to call it out.
Yep.
That's what anti-racism is about, is really calling it out. The complicity that has gone on for too long, which is understandable. It's a hard conversation to have that, again, we were never taught to have. But if we allow these conversations to people to say hurtful, whether it's, you know, racialized, really discriminatory, really
Mhm.
prejudiced things, that's what we can do individually, is have those courageous conversations, have the courage to be bold, call it out, and
Yeah.
that can help us get to a better, equitable place for all of us.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. I completely agree. So,
Uh,
Jenny, before we go, what are some self-care, just, despite all of, the heavy topics and all of the things that you're constantly working through and working on, how does Jenny take care of her? I know you told me today that you put on makeup for like the first time in how long?
right. A long time. No, honestly, it's for all of you out there that I
I know if you
have.
guys want to see us, go on YouTube. You'll be able to you'll see how we look.
Right. Yes. Yes. I actually took time today to put on this face, to do this hair. I don't wake up like this, unfortunately not. That's okay. I own it. Uh,
I think you do.
you're too kind. I really don't. It's called makeup.
Beautiful. My beautiful
um,
friend.
but that's always a great question. And that's such a good question because I've been thinking about it and practicing it so much,
Mm-hmm.
especially 2020. And for me, a few things. I love being on my bike, especially being here in San Francisco. It's a very bike-friendly city.
Mm-hmm.
Bikes, I don't know if you knew, in 2020 were sold out and back ordered for quite some time. People could not get a hold of a bike.
Really?
Right,
Wait, I
right.
bought a bike too. When did I buy it?
Oh, that's great that you didn't encounter that issue. A lot of
Yeah.
folks had reached out to me. It's like, does your friend who used to own public bikes, you know, is there a way to, can he help me get a bike? I'm like, well, unfortunately, he sold the company. But multiple people reach out to me. I'm like, wow, multiple people cannot get a bike. And so I remember researching, yeah, there was a back order of bikes for some time. And
Wow.
so I felt so lucky because I've always had this bike through my friend who used to own
Uh-huh.
public bikes. Um, and I'm so grateful like that I have it. And so that's been a concerted effort for me as often as I can to try to bike. If I need to go down to FedEx or go to the grocery store, I'm going to ride on my bike. I'm going to go on my bike.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so that's been really nice. And then meditating is something that I'm still practicing. It's
Mm-hmm.
still a lot of practice for me, but it's
It's
something that,
tough.
yeah, it's,
Tough.
for some might be an easier practice, for others may not be. For mine, it's been a beautiful journey. Um, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have started the journey of meditation. And I would recommend it for
Mm-hmm.
everyone.
Mm-hmm.
A therapist, thank goodness. Hallelujah. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Patty. Thank you. Thanks for all.
Also, I'm not Jenny's therapist.
No.
But I think, she has her own,
Oh,
just FYI. I know
yeah.
sometimes friends
And
will tell me like, "Can you please be my therapist?" And I'm like, "No, I'm your friend. Let me
right.
be your friend."
It would be an incredible therapist, but I totally get it. I totally get it. And so if you're fortunate to have that access, I feel grateful that I have access to that. But if you don't have access to that, a simple thing is breathing exercises that anyone can
Mhm.
do. Take deep breaths. There's a lot of great YouTube tutorials, and there's been a few that I've been able to find that I really like, and are kind of my go-tos. Have been really nice. And reading, that's one place where I can get my mind off of everything being in another world. And there's so many great books out there right now. Yeah.
You're doing it all, girl. I love it. I love it. So Jenny, where can people find you to learn more about your resources and information? Can you share that here?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to my website, jennyton.com. You could go to my journal, aka blog there. There's a lot of information resources on what you can do. My social media at Jenny.ton.consulting. So you can go to my IG, it's at jenny.ton.consulting. The same for Facebook. Twitter is jton consulting, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to connect there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny, so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I miss you. I can't wait to see you soon. And thank you for being a guest here on this platform with me.
Oh, thank you for creating the space. Thank you for having the courage to create such an incredible space.
Thank you.
I appreciate the topics that you've brought up in your podcast. So everyone sign up for her podcast. Wherever you can access podcasts, do it now. Give her a great review.
Yeah, subscribe. Yes, subscribe.
Subscribe, give her, yep, yeah, all of that. Review. It's so good. It's so good. And so I'm really grateful. Thank you, Patty, for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yes, everybody. And so please subscribe and rate. That helps me. It doesn't take you much time, maybe like 2 to 3 minutes, and it helps me a lot. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Jenny, so much. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And bye, everyone. Take good care.
Bye, everybody.